Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Friday Night Blender Hangouts. Tonight we're gonna get into sculpting a little bit more on my current project. If you haven't seen this before, my name is Brandon Hicks. I'm a Blender Foundation certified trainer, and I'm doing this hangout session and all of my hangout sessions to get to know you guys more and to just jump in and share some of my workflow with you guys. So if you want to jump in with Blender, open it up on your own system, sculpt or model or do anything you want to along with me. I'm going to have the chat open so I can, kind of connect with you guys. And so just let me know if you have any questions along the way. I'm going to be doing this for the next couple of hours. And I'm here for you guys. So let's get into it. Let me switch my screen over here. All right, so if you've been following the streams the past few nights, you've seen me work on this bad boy. And this is a sort of decorative teaspoon that I'm working on. And so we've taken this all the way from the beginning model from sub D into sculpting, and now we're working on detailing things out. So before I jump into the rest of this, quick reminder for everyone, this is the reference we're working on. In terms of the bigger project, this is going to be a 3D illustration. And so I'm working on this little T set in this upper corner right here. And I'm also going to show you guys the reference really quick before we get started. All right, so this is our spoon that we're referencing for the details. So you can kind of see the the details that I've pulled off of this in terms of trying to mimic that on my own spoon. Tonight we're going to be trying to block in most of the overall forms and the details, and it's going to be kind of interesting because we have the spoon as one object, and then we have this sort of side addition as a separate object. So we're going to have to find a way to kind of seamlessly blend between the two. So that's what we're going to get into. All right, let's do it. So I've been trying to kind of experiment with things as we get into these streams in terms of what you guys want to see. Music, no music in the background. Is my mic level okay? All that kind of stuff. So I'm also new to this in terms of streaming. And so if you have any constructive criticism, let me know in the comments or reach out to me, and I'll be happy to take all of that under consideration. All right, so let's get going here. For the most part, I'm using dynamic topology to help me along, and it seems to be doing a pretty good job. It's a game of give and take, which I talked a little bit about last night, but I'm gonna try to do as much as I can not to repeat myself a lot as we get it going in this. All right, so trying to stay sort of at a medium distance or further out. I don't want to zoom way in here yet and get too much into that. We've got this front piece sort of worked up to a more finished level, and we'll have to do a couple of more passes of refinement to get all these edges dialed in. But I want to block everything into this level right now, and then come back and just make sure we're at a good place. All right. So I've got my little Wacom tablet set up here, and let's get going. So I found even between sessions from last night and today and the past several days, every little session requires getting back in here and kind of reacquainting yourself with the tools as you go. And so it's one of those things that just comes with practice, and I tend to do better towards the latter half of the stream than the front half, but something to kind of be aware of. So any of these big giant, areas that are just blocky like this, I want to try to get rid of that. And because I'm using that dynamic topology, it's making that a lot easier to come back in and carve in those areas at a closer range. And then that allows me to go back and smooth like this, and it just kind of brings all of that detail level together. So we've got a lot of inconsistency happening with this edge right now. And so one of the things I'm going to be doing is, as we get into blocking in the rest of the stuff, is trying to even up those bigger edges so that we're not starting off, you know, with anything kind of working against us as we get in and do the finer details. Because by the time we zoom in and start working on all of those other sections, the bigger areas need to kind of be blocked into a level that we're satisfied with, and then we need to just kind of leave those bigger shapes alone. So we can add up some of that clay there with the strips, just doing multiple stroke passes. Okay. You can also jump into the grab tool, and this works best without the dynamic topology turned on for things like this, because we're not trying to add geometry or take geometry away. Also notice that if I use my mouse instead of the tablet pen, for whatever reason, it seems to be a little bit more responsive. So something interesting to keep in mind. Okay. All right, so one of the things we might do as we get back in here is turn up the detail size a little bit, and just make sure we're you know, kind of happy with the way things are working out here. It's harder to control all these little edges if you add too much too early, and I'm kind of seeing some breakup happen here. So I just want to dial this in correctly. There we go. Yeah, that's weird. Okay. And then I want to get some of these dots in here, just so we have those kind of in a good place before I forget and I start changing settings on this this tool. So last night we discovered what kind of distance we need to be at to make this work correctly. So we used smooth stroke, and then we're gonna have to play with the radius and the factor to kind of dial this in. So I'm actually gonna turn that back down, and then let's play with this a little bit. Okay, so it seems to be a good distance, but I want the drawing to start happening quicker, so I'm going to lower that factor. Okay, now looking at the reference, I think they're a little big, so we're going to lower the size here, and then once again, I'm going to lower this down a little bit more. Start it up here. And then of course, as we lower the size, we're gonna need to lower the radius a little bit as we go too. So if I just start drawing here with the mouse, we can kind of play with this a little bit. That's a little better. So I might go up just a tiny bit. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so I'm gonna start up here. Pretty close to this edge, and then I'm going to follow along this curve, pulling that up into that right there. Okay, so that's pretty good. One more try. We're gonna go a little lower this time on the last part of that stroke. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay. So now let's beef these up a little bit. Use inflate. Get in here, and as we've zoomed in, it's going to add a little bit of geometry as we inflate these, and then I'll smooth these back out a little bit. So under the smooth, we're going to want to bring the strength down to something fairly low. Okay. So I'm just wanting to round these out a little bit. So I'll do this here, and then I'll go back and hold shift and then smooth these out. And there we go. Doesn't take much. But the cool thing about this simple detail is that using this technique with sculpting and the tools to our advantage, we're basically blocking in a sort of final level of detail. We're not going to need to do a lot to kind of bring this all together towards the end. So as long as we stay away from going back over with a big smooth or anything that would kind of disrupt this, then we should be in a good place with this detail. If you're not super familiar with the workflow, basically what we're trying to do is we have started with a pretty optimized mesh in terms of building the spoon out, and it was pretty clean. And then we're jumping in to detail out the surface, but this mesh is obviously really messy. And so what we're gonna end up doing is going back in with a new mesh kind of built on top of it, and we're gonna retopologize to build the new mesh, the new spoon around these new details, taking those into account. And it's really just the silhouettes that we're worried about. We're not really worried about getting in here and creating little spherical domes for all these little details here. But what we're going to do after we get a finalized mesh built is we're going to bake with a texture map all of these details back into texture map so that we can use a lower res mesh for our final render and capture all of these little bumps and etchings and things on the spoon surface that we want to keep from the sculpt phase. All right, almost done with this. I don't know, I think I may want to add one more of those dots in there. And so I'm going to change the stroke type from dots to a drag dot. And that should allow me to kind of drag with my mouse and put one of these in somewhere. And I'm going to zoom out a bit. Put it right about there. Okay. And now let's switch back to the inflate. Okay, so smooth is getting a little too, where is it? Yeah, there we go. A little too subtle. So I'm going to turn this back up to 0.3. There we go. And then for this, I'm going to do the same thing. Let's go up to 0.4. There we go. Okay. So the big details for that object are pretty much in place. And now what I want to do is start getting in here, and maybe at the top of the spoon, we can start blocking in some of those bigger shapes and deciding how we need to merge. Before I do that, I'm going to do a little bit more work on this upper side. So there is some things happening with this that we need to kind of pay attention to. Ultimately, this piece is pretty well blended into the ornamentation on top of the spoon. And so we just need to keep in mind how we're going to resolve that as we go. And eventually we'll get in here and every piece of the surface will be as smooth as this is right here, but we need to be patient and you know, not get too much in a hurry to do that, because once we add that detail in, we tend to want to, you know, continue to zoom in further and further and further, and then it's harder to dial back the intensity of stuff, and can ultimately lead to, you know, us making decisions that we're going to have to unmake later. Just not an easy thing to do. Okay, I think there's some smaller details on this little ridge right here I want to make. So it kind of looks like it's sinking into the mesh right there, but it's actually adding. So sometimes your eyes can play tricks on you a little bit when you're trying to read what the shadows are doing, whether they're going in and out. So just be aware of that. Okay, let's leave this section here for a minute. Let's save real fast. Let's switch back to the spoon. Okay, so I went ahead and hid the front half of this while we're working on this end, because it's going to speed things up a little bit for us. So I'm going to stick with clay strips. Make sure dynamic topology is turned on. And we're going to leave detail size 3 or 4. It's probably a good number. Okay, I've been getting this error that vertex data is detected. At some point when I was sculpting, I went in and accidentally added a color map for vertex colors, and I've been deleting this over and over and over again for whatever reason. Blender just refuses to remember that that's gone. Yeah, so you can see that it just continuously comes back. So I don't really know if that's a bug or how to fix that, but anyways, don't ever add a vertex color if you're sculpting with dynamic topology, because it doesn't like it. All right, so I'm gonna pull the reference over so you can see what we're doing now. We're going back in on the top of this handle, and we're gonna kind of quickly block into the level that we did down here, the flowery shapes. And the tough part about this is that we're gonna have to turn symmetry off to make this work, because there's not really an easy way to leave that on and get a unique shape there. And so it's going to take a little bit more time. And then we're going to need to make sure we're height-wise building up the forms back here so we can start blending those in. And what I'm trying to do is kind of blur my look and my view of these smaller details. And I'm just looking for the bigger hills and valleys that we're trying to get at. Because if you simplify this down, you basically have, you know, a ramp that blends into the spoon and then it ramps up into this bigger kind of shape. And then out of that, you've just basically got bumps in the surface that we're trying to get in there. So I'm not going to go super specific right now. We're just trying to get all of that blocked in so that we can move into the details. So the trick is going to be kind of staying a little further out. If we want to get a little tighter, we can always lower the detail size and kind of compensate for that sort of stuff. So paying attention to the reference, the detail actually starts ramping up right about here. And of course, with symmetry still turned on for this part of it, it's relatively easy to kind of figure out where we want to go with this. So I'm just making sure that I kind of come out where I need to for this side of it. And it gets pretty close to the edge over here. So this is where we're going to have to start blending all of these details in. And we're building up quite a lot of height back in here. So it's kind of rounding out like that. Once again, make sure we're happy with the way things are shaping up over here. One of the other things I'll mention kind of as we get into this tonight is a realization as you get in here and you start trying to improve your hands-on sculpting skills, which is really kind of the point of adding an object like this into the illustration for me, because I want to improve the sculpt side of it. It's there's a lot of variables involved in technique with this part of the process. And so a lot of people think, well, you know, the ability to sculpt in insanely good details has to come from, you know, the kinds of brushes that you use, or maybe it's, you know, knowing how to control the detail at every stage as you sculpt out and things like that. And the truth is, it's a little bit of everything. And ultimately, the most cliche answer is going to be, you know, experience. But a better answer that I've been kind of thinking through to give you guys is that when you're starting off and you're learning how to do, you know, basic exercises in sculpting, when you're learning how to switch between the brushes and get the interface down, all of that gets in your way and it feels very clumsy. And so it can feel kind of awkward to get in here and do anything really useful. Over time, you'll pick up the interface and then another problem will emerge. You know, you'll find out how hard it really is to control, you know, the detail as you are zooming in and out, things like that. Then you'll decide that you're not utilizing all the tools to your advantage the way you could. With one tool, it might take you 10 strokes to get something down. With another tool, it might only take you 2. And so you'll start realizing that sort of stuff. And that gets into brush economy, which is something a little bit more advanced that all artists that paint or sculpt or things like that, they talk about. And that's just being efficient with your time and not wasting it. And so the other thing that I'm realizing too as I get back into this is that I have a tablet that I'm using for, you know, making this simpler and getting in here and blocking in these details with pressure sensitivity. Well, controlling your your need to get in here with a tablet and feel for things is really hard. You're having to train yourself to pay attention to. There's not a lot of tactile give and take with the tablet and the computer. I can't feel the clay that I'm sculpting into, and you forget that how hard you press on the tablet as you're smoothing and things like that can really play a big effect on what's happening on the screen. And so remembering that and trying to coordinate that sort of thing with everything else you're learning simultaneously, that's the real challenge. Because it's easy to remember, one or two or three things and try to keep those in your head as you go when you're learning. But trying to keep 10 things in your head that if you could keep those all in your head simultaneously would make you a master at what you're doing, only comes with practice and muscle memory to the point where you've done it so much that you don't even have to think about it anymore. And so unfortunately, the only way to really get there is to practice your craft. So that's why a lot of times when you hear people just say, well, you need to practice, and it feels like a cop-out sort of answer, it's really not. It's just that putting that into words is not the easiest thing to articulate to people that are asking you to define, how did you get better at the kinds of stuff that you're doing? And it's different for everybody, obviously. Okay, I've got enough clay sort of built up now and to the detail level that I'm happy with that. And so now I'm going to turn symmetry off and start actually playing with this stuff. Okay. So as we get back in here, we're kind of bringing this entire back end into a swirl, it's like a feathered pattern back here. And so I'm going to try to find a nice balance between brush size and distance as we get in here to make sure I'm not getting too crazy with what we're doing. So I'm seeing that some of this needs to be a little bit higher back in here. So you can see that coming into that edge right there, blending in a little bit more. So this is what clay strips is really kind of good for, is doing this and pulling this stuff out. If you need to go out further than this from the mesh, then the snake hook tool is really what you want to be using to pull off big chunks from a mesh with dynamic topology turned on. So you can also use grab with that turned on to try to grab some of this and bring it out further over here. Really want that to be kind of out far enough to come off that silhouette. So once we have that, just need enough to get a lip there, and then we can jump back in and start playing with the shape of it. Okay. So something like that. This is coming in here, and then, so here's a good example. I could sit here and dig with clay strips, or I could jump over to crease and just with one stroke kind of get in there and pull a big channel through this area right here. So with 2 or 3 strokes, that's all we got, and then we're back. Excuse me. Now you could debate between whether or not it's faster to switch between 2 tools, but ultimately that comes down to your workflow and you just having to decide, what's best. All right, so I'm gonna do that some more and just kind of work on digging some of these bigger channels through here. It's important that we get kind of a good size going for us. Okay. You can see that the curve here is not set to smooth. It's set to sort of be more pointed in the middle, so we're not getting as smooth of a stroke there. So we gotta decide whether we like that or not. Can also go with a linear curve to kind of really leave those edges undefined. I think in this case, I kind of like what it's doing. So I want to make sure I leave this wall kind of where it is, and then I'm trying to pay attention to where this starts up here, and then kind of pulls back through this mesh down through here. At some point it gets to the bottom and it kind of just stops, and it's going to be up to us to kind of decide, you know, what's working and what's not as far as that goes. So again, we're thinking big, we're thinking ins and outs. And not super happy with the way that's looking. So I'm gonna undo some of this and turn on smooth stroke to help us out a little bit. Because I think cleaning this up is gonna be more trouble than it's worth. Undo. I don't want to go back too far. Okay. Let's turn on smooth stroke and then let's play. Yeah, it's better. So what's great about this is anytime you need to do curvature, it's really kind of your friend here. Makes it easy to jump in there and kind of work with that. So now that we've got these bigger in and outs kind of defined, we can go in and start cleaning up those ridges a little bit. So have to kind of decide. I'm just going to use clay strips at this point. It's a weird combination of rounded off edges and anyways, we'll play with this. So now I'm zooming in a lot further, and I'm kind of playing with how this looks. And I'm not going to spend too much time getting in here and doing this right now because I want to continue the block in as we get in here further. But just to kind of show you where we're headed with this, I want to do something a little bit more like that. Work these up over here. And then let's see. Zoom out a little bit more so we got some more to play with there. This ridge is actually really high up. Clean this up a little bit. Okay. Got a pocket a little bit in here, and then there's another ridge that comes out over there. Okay. Okay, looking at sort of a further out view going into the side over here. Just gonna quickly run around and block in some of this detail. The tough part about this too, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit last night, is there's so much going on with you know, this this ornamentation down here that it's hard to kind of know where to start. So I do know right here in the middle is got a flower sort of happening. So the way this works is we've got some bigger petal shapes coming off. And this is you know, really kind of pronounced. So zoom in a little bit. This is really coming off the side here, so play this up. We'll come back to the center of this, kind of, there's a little indentation there. Put that in there. Okay. See what else is happening over here. Okay, so I want to tighten these edges up a little bit. So ultimately here, it's about establishing contrast in the shape. There's not a lot of height except for some of these petals on this side that pretty raised up off the surface. But in this case, it's fairly even with the overall shape of the mesh. And so we just need to establish that. Okay, so there's another flower over here. I'm trying to see what other kind of details we have. In the end, it won't really matter how closely we stick to the reference. We can kind of make some of this up as we go, but we need to kind of establish a baseline for success here. All right, so we've got some ridges, sort of ribbon patterns coming out over here. Some of this is floral, so it's kind of compensating, or not compensating, complementing what is happening with the flowers on this side. This is where we get more into how we need to blend some of this together. So what I'm gonna do a little bit right now is just, rather than focusing on getting these details in here perfectly, I'm just gonna quickly make a roadmap using the clay tools, clay strips tool, to block in some impressions on the mesh that tells me where I'm headed next. So some of these little swirly things happening here, those are terminating up into a design over here. Some interesting floral stuff happening on that side, and then ultimately we have sort of a bigger bunch of flowers and vines and things like that happening all the way down to the bottom here. So let's start here with sort of a something to show where we're going to end up. Okay, and underneath that we've got sort of a bud that connects it. We've got sort of like a little flower shape that hooks around down here. And same sort of thing over here on this side. We've got okay. Hey there. No, I'm not using a mouse. I'm using a Wacom tablet. Thanks for checking out the stream. All right. Yeah, all right. So Got a little bit of some of these stems happening towards the bottom, and then it's pretty dense in here. So all these little pieces are intertwining to come back towards a main bud over here. I'm good. How you doing? Let's see. Liking the imprint pattern here, but it's a little hard to tell what's going on sometimes. All right, not really getting enough resolution here, so I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. Not too much. Okay, we got okay, so once we get back in here, we've got a couple of leaves. On both sides. No, just going into here, we've got some flowers. That's what's going on. Okay. I gotta tell you, from this one angle, from this reference, it's really kind of hard to see what I'm doing. Okay, so back into some of these blossoms over here. So these have an interesting way of, they're kind of like a fan shape coming around. They don't just star out like a flower pattern you would expect to see with these. They're kind of stylized in a way. So on these outer edges, you almost want to bring them up higher than on the inside. That makes sense. So we can kind of blend towards the middle a little bit. Save real fast. Come back up over here. Two, three, four, yeah. Blends. This one coming out over here. There we go. So yeah, that works a little better. Carving it on the inside of those. Kind of define those arms that are coming out a little more. Okay, so within each of these flowers, there's sort of this outer ring, and then in the middle, it's got an indentation, so something like that. Okay. All right, so now we want to start combining some of the supporting structure behind here into what we got going down at the bottom and bridging the gap a little bit. So got some of this kind of coming in down here. This looks like it's sort of tying in with that stem a little bit. And then we've got some stuff happening over here. This is a flower down here we'll need to put in. So I'm gonna run back down to this one, kind of do what we were just talking about. So these outer arms will pull up. We'll kind of dig in right here. Just trying to think of a way to, you know, simplify the process in these flowers. And I think that kind of going with that same pattern is what's going to help define that. Somebody had the question a couple of nights ago, why am I not just using, you know, an alpha or something like that? And normally I would, but in this case, it's a situation where I wanted to kind of get back in here and work on my sculpting skills. And this also has a lot more hand, it just feels like it was handmade. And so I wanted to kind of capture that a little bit more, which I could have done, you know, with an alpha and then come back in and, you know, played a little bit with making it feel that way. But in this case, I just figured, why not jump in here and spend some more time with you guys and do it the old fashioned way. Okay, so yeah, so this we're really going to want to dig in a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. And it's not really having much of an effect, so I could either turn the strength up or zoom out, and I think I'm just going to zoom out. Okay. Yeah, it's decent. Okay. So good enough for the block in, and then let's go over here. Now, I don't have the other side of this pattern. It's very hard to tell what's going on in the photo, so I'm just gonna kind of make some of this up as we go. I do know there's a flower that's pretty much right here, so be safe to block this in. And now that we kind of know what our method of working for these flowers is going to be, it'll be hopefully a little easier to speedily get these in place. Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of a spacing issue here. Work this out. So, Black, I'm gonna call you Black on Twitch. You got anything you're working on right now? Anything you want to chat about? Working on a car? Oh, cool. Are you pumped for 2.8 coming out soon? Oh, cool. Yeah, we're gonna be doing some baking when I get the retopo finished on this at some point. Definitely not tonight. Okay, so try to do this with layer and see what happens. Okay. Yeah, I agree. 2.8 is going to be amazing. So let's quickly get these inner edges sort of smoothed back down. And again, just pulled that off a little bit with a layer tool. And then now I'm kind of going back in and trying to find the height that we're working with here. So everything to the right, smoothing back down so we can kind of play with some contrast here. Yeah, Eevee is gonna be sweet. I don't do as much real-time stuff, but I'm thinking about changing some of that because a lot of what used to only be possible in something like Cycles is now going to be completely doable in Eevee. So that's a big plus. There we go. So I just want to kind of take these bigger blocky edges and I'm very subtly going back in with smooth and a little bit of the clay strips to build that wall with some more dense polys in there. Okay. Decent. And we can also do that more as we get in here and start to finalize these the height of all of these details, you know. But for now, that's pretty good. So let's check the reference again. Not exactly sure what's going on over here. So I'm just gonna kind of doodle around until we find something that seems like it'll work. So here's where being very gentle with the stroke on your tablet comes in. So you don't want to just smooth away all those details. So you gotta take it a little easy. Okay. How are we looking? Oh, this way. Okay, so I definitely want to do that same sort of trick on this flower, pull that up off of the mesh quite a bit. It would be very hard once we start blocking in these details to go back in and try to carve in those recesses with crease or something like that without destroying some of these bigger shapes that we've already spent a lot of time tweaking. So the best solution at this point, if we've got an area that's already blocked out to even a medium level of detail, would be to kind of mask out what we want to play with height-wise, and then pull it out with a layer or a grab or something like that. And this is one of those few times that I feel like using a layer actually does its job really well. So just something like that, just enough to pull it, and then we clear the mask and kind of go back in and start playing. Okay, so I'm a little close right now to get any effective bigger changes happening. So I'm zooming out a little bit, and the reason that's working at this point is because we've got dynamic topology turned on with relative detail, and we're keeping a constant detail size. And so as soon as you kind of lock in your distances and you know how that's working for your particular sculpture, you can kind of feel that out for your project and see what's working and what's not working. So one of the things we might have done with a mask, and we might get a chance to do it again if we have another flower to work on, is yeah, I don't want to do that. I need to change the curvature if we want to dig in like that, and I'll probably use a crease. We might have left these inner areas unmasked so that when we pulled the rest of that up, that those would have stayed at that same level and we wouldn't have to be digging back in to separate the height back out. But in this case, it's not taking tons of time to kind of make that work. So that said, any time saved is you know, time you got to work on something else in the project, so keep that in mind. Okay. This is actually the part of sculpting that I enjoy the most, because thinking about how you're going to, you know, get the big stuff kind of in place is a lot less fun than detailing. Detailing's kind of it's kind of mindless. You get in here and get into the groove, put some music on or something, and then just, you know, you play. Up until that point, you're kind of on the clock. You got to think on your toes. And, you know, detailing can be tedious, but I don't know. I tend to enjoy the tedious part of this stuff. It's kind of the same way with polygonal modeling. The sub-D process, you know, I kind of enjoy I wouldn't go so far as to say I enjoyed, Retopo. I don't know if anybody does, and that, but definitely, building out the shapes and stuff as we get into that process is something I kind of think is fun. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's kind of what I grew up on, so it's what I'm used to. All right, so we brought up a little bit of this outside corner here, which I don't really want, so I'm gonna carve that back in a little bit till we're close to the same height of the rest of the mesh, and then we'll just smooth that away. Okay. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. UVing is not fun. And, I've seen tools and use some of them on projects that make it easier, but man, I gotta tell you, UVing hard surface stuff, just not fun. And I'm all for switching to a new kind of tech that removes that part of the process. And it's out there, we just don't have it in Blender right now. I haven't really heard yet, but I'm really kind of hoping they bring UDIM support to 2.8. And I don't know if it's on the radar or not. I haven't really been paying attention to that front, but I hope so. Okay, that's enough for now. So the cool thing about this, and why, again, hand sculpting this really doesn't matter in this case, is because it's got this sort of tarnished kind of look to it that lends itself for this sort of process working. So even if we don't spend a lot of time going back in and cleaning up some of this edge detail, as long as the silhouette's working and there's not any major bumps and stuff like over here, it's the detail on this side of it it's just going to work, because we can, fix up most of what we need to with, cycles and shaders and stuff like that. So now we're going to get back in here and play a little bit more with how these are blending. Yeah, I agree on the smart UV thing. It's definitely saved my butt a few times. The last project I had, well, this project will have it too, but I haven't really got there yet. I really got into using Blender's UV tools, which I hadn't, experimented with much before that, instead of, unless I was working on characters and stuff like that. Because so much of the time I just use procedural stuff and I don't really need to UV. And I'm not really baking for games or stuff like that. So a lot of times I'm not use them, but this past few projects I've gotten a lot more into doing custom stuff, and yeah, man, UVs, ugh. I wish there was an easy way to paint, like you can paint in Substance. I wish there was a fast way to do that on higher poly stuff, because even Substance on, stuff like this would start chugging. So I like that it's heading that way, but I really don't want to have to shell out for Mari or something like that to be able to paint my high res stuff. All right, where am I at? Okay, so it looks like got another flower possibly down here somewhere. All right, so Let's decide where these are and kind of play. If I look from the top, it definitely looks like they're kind of piggybacking down the side, so I probably want to put the other one down here somewhere. Yeah, agreed. Definitely like me some ZBrush. I don't get to play with that as much as I used to, but I'm hoping to get back into that as well. I spend so much time in Blender teaching and everything that I tend to just stay here whenever I can. I guess hoping that they're gonna eventually catch up, but you know, we'll see. Probably not gonna happen. All right, so let's map this out a little bit here. Make this one kind of big. Okay. So let's play with that idea this time when we mask. We go back and kind of paint out those areas in the center. We'll leave a little bit of a lip on this side. That way we've got a little bit of extra geometry to smooth out as we kind of play with things. Okay, now let's jump into layer again. And let's pull this out. Ugh. Okay. All right, let's fix this before I have a heart attack. So we'll smooth that out over here. In fact, to get started, I'm just going to zoom way out. And I'm going to do big smooth. Okay. Okay, so you can kind of see, kind of like the arms of a hurricane. You've got some of that waviness happening there on those outer edges, and that's what we're trying to mimic there. And you got to think, you know, as somebody was going in and, you know, either hand doing this or it was pressed in a big hydraulic press or however it was done back in those days, you know, you've got areas that, you know, it's a mold. So you've got areas that are going to go in and they're going to work out well and they're going to press out. And then there's some areas that are maybe not going to press evenly. And so you're going to have these big gaps in consistency, which again is why we're kind of choosing to work on it this way. Gives it that hand done feel because, you know, well, it's hand done. Not a great way to mimic that, even if you're going to texture with an image that you just drop in Photoshop. It's good to get in there with your painting skills and, you know, work things out. Okay. Smooth this out a little bit. Kind of reshape that wall a little bit there. It's getting a little lost. There we go. And want it a little bit more angular like that. Dig in around those edges to just further separate that height. If I was going to do a ton more of these, it probably would be a good idea to just go ahead and draw up a black and white alpha to use, but there's really not that many to paint in here, so just good practice. Let's see, I don't want that edge there. Okay. Getting close, getting close. And then we can jump back in and start refining stuff. So we need to fill this area in down here somewhere with some stuff. Kind of decide what we want that to look like. In this case, I think another one of these might do the trick. So we get it in there quick and then kind of zoom in and play a little bit with some of this stuff. So once I do a stroke, I'm just really quickly going back over with a very light smooth to differentiate some of that height. And then we really want to get in here and start playing with cleaning this up. What we need to start doing is kind of pinching these edges. And so if we're going to go down the middle of this, we need to, we have dynamic topology turned on? Yeah, okay. Pull out a little bit and then go down like this. Start creasing stuff up there. And if we want to do some of these recesses, so that was pinch, this is crease. Come in here like this, and once again we've got that lazy mouse turned on, which just makes it so easy to just, you know, get this stuff in here fast and easy. Something like that. So, you know, it's just give and take. As you've got that contrast built up, then when you go back in and you try to crease, it's going to be easier to refine those edges. And you can crease on the heights, you can crease in the valleys, and either way it works. So, stuff like that. Okay. See, we have about half an hour left. So what I'm probably gonna do tonight is just continue to refine as we go, and then before next week, I'll come back in and wrap up, and maybe we'll go over sort of a retopology, or I'll just kind of show you what I did. We'll jump into another part of the model, but anyways, I gotta get all this stuff done soon because gotta move on. So pinching on these flowers here is getting a better angle here so you can see what I'm doing. So these outer borders, pinch those up, inner borders, pinch those up, and you can just see quickly as we kind of work our way around how it tightens up that detail. Even on the outside edges here, just a little bit of a pinch as you go can make that seem a bit more intentional, which is really the whole point. You want to make all of these strokes feel intentional so that it doesn't look like you just got sloppy. There we go. And you don't want to crease, you know, everything. You want to leave a little bit of contrast in the way that you're deciding to differentiate. But if you crease in the same places on a pattern like this, that shows that you meant to do it. There's more going on there, but that's kind of the point. You want it to make it look intentional. So yeah, you can see by pulling out now that that just looks a little bit more refined than it did. So there we go. Go a little bit more down there maybe. You can see how that defines the height of that wall a little bit. If we crease this edge, it'll even give us a little bit more dimension, makes it feel a little boxier, a little bit more like it was a pressed in there. Yeah, there we go. Save again. Let's play with this back end a little bit and kind of see what we can do. It's got this interesting thing that's happening in the reference where it kind of twists off to one side. So let's see if I can kind of play with that a little bit. Grab, rotate. So I want to try to get this in here the best way we can. Doesn't take much to do what we need. So I wonder if we need to grab from one side over here. So maybe do that, and then we can grab it and pull it over a little bit. Kind of straighten it back out because it tails off kind of in a J to one side. And we can also rotate from back here. Not so much. Yeah, okay. Then we can go back in and kind of fix the things that are happening here with the back end. So using deflate a little bit to collapse in the sides over here, smooth this out. And yeah, just want to make sure we don't have symmetry turned on. Yeah, there we go. It's doing what I wanted. All right, so let's jump back into crease and kind of see what we can do. So these are doing some interesting things. These little swirls, they're terminating in sort of the way these are, with sort of these drops that are happening. And so what I'm going to do is play a little bit with those details and make sure we have the right tool selected here. Okay, so I'm zoomed in pretty close at this point. So we're definitely going to be adding more detail into this area. And once again, just kind of looking at the reference as we go what we want. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of put this in here down here because we want it to terminate into an area like that. So I'm going to inflate this out a little bit more so we've got a good starting point. Okay, now let's go back and smooth. All right, so we're gonna want to end up kind of in here somewhere. And so this is gonna kind of start here. And then we're gonna go out and spiral up into this section here. So if you don't have a really steady hand, this is another good place you might want to use the smooth stroke because it can be hard to do straight curves or not straight curves, curvy curves, you know. Okay, here's another good example of something you should pay attention to. Here, I'm, eyeballing this from off to the side, and it's now skewed. So if you're gonna draw something, make sure if it's a pattern, you're kind of drawing it straight on, so you're not letting the perspective kind of get the best of you. So let's do that again. Let's smooth this out. I might use blob a little bit to get this up in the middle. There we go. That's better. Okay, so let's turn on smooth stroke. Let's zoom in a little bit, and we'll start back here and make sure I get a good curve on that. There we go. So we'll start. Okay, so let's try that one more time. We're a little close to this wall, so I may start it over here instead. Something like that. Now, I want to smooth this out a little more as we go. So let's play with the smooth factor, turn that up a little more, lower the radius a little bit so it starts a little sooner. Okay, so it just takes practice getting this down to where it's doing what you want it to do. Okay, a little bit more, I want a more round spiral than that. So let's try going from this side. Let's start up here so we get a little bit more lead time. Go around and something more like that. Once I get a good guide, the rest of this will come pretty easily. But I want to match as much of that curvature as I possibly can. Okay, I can live with that. We'll start there. So let's turn off smooth stroke. Zoom in again. Let's play with the way this is. Blending in here. Okay. Let's pull a little bit more. This outside edge over here. Okay. A little better. I might pull another sort of layer off on this side, starting here, coming around. Come off into a little sort of swirly pattern over here. Totally just making this up like I do have some experience with this sort of patterning, but you know, it's usually never right the first time. You gotta play with it. Okay, so there we go, something like that. Let's play with kind of digging in a little more. Starting here, we're gonna follow this around. Something like that. And then we might do another channel over here. Okay, we're out of space on my tablet. All right, let's try that again. Okay, something like that. Let's come back a little further and kind of dig in some more of those channels even further up here. Now these don't continue all the way down to this tip, so I kind of like the way that it's looking in the reference. I'm going to leave it that way for our model. So we'll play with some of these directions right here. And do this last one a little bit. Got a little crazy. Okay, so this one, I'm gonna pull down, kind of go this way a little bit. Switch back to clay strips. Smooth. There we go. Okay, something we can kind of do here is, if we don't want these to be super rounded off, which they're not as rounded as they appear here, before I do that, I'm gonna inflate this one a little more. So I'm gonna grab flatten and come back in and kind of give some more dimension to these on the top surface here. See if those are even before we get started, and then kind of go back in and flatten from the top here. By the time we get down here, it's kind of splaying off on the end. So we got two channels kind of converging here in the middle. So we'll flatten a little bit here. Make sure that's even enough. Okay. So before I get too aggressive with that, just gonna come back in, make sure this height is comparable to the rest of these, which it's not. It's pretty beaten down already. So I want to thicken this back up down here. Might lead that channel into this one, something like that. Kind of like that. And then back here, just do a little bit of a smooth over the whole thing. Okay. All right, so on this side, we do have one of those sort of patterns happening here. So I'm gonna grab crease and try to define how this is working. Okay, so it's kind of getting off kilter there. Before we do that, let's kind of play with this shape a little bit with clay strips and get it beat into submission. Okay, that's a little better. So I'm going to start back here with the stroke. I'm going to pull this around. Don't like that last one. To figure out where I want this to kind of go up in here. I think I want it to be sort of on this outer edge. We'll hook back in kind of tight and then end it right there. So you can see kind of what that's doing to help pop that out of that shape. That's very wobbly, so we're gonna need to, again, get back in here and reshape it, but at least the boundaries have kind of been defined for us. Anything that's popping out as I rotate around that's not kind of working for the silhouette, we need to fix. So seeing where we ended that line there, we need to connect that back up. So let's pull this from here, continue that around, tuck that in behind there. And then we'll go back with our other tools and kind of reinforce the decision we just made. But so dig in on the outside, add clay on the inside with clay strips. And you can kind of see what it's doing to add a little bit of extra bulge on that outer wall, which is really all we need to tone that up. The rest we can take care of with a pinch at some point. Okay, so in this section, I like the way it's, you know, molded right now, but it's looking a little wobbly. So let's grab and move this section. Grab's a little weird sometimes. You got to be patient with the tool. So right here, it's not big enough. Undo that. Let's also turn off dynamic topology because that'll slow it down. We don't really need it at this point. There we go. So just subtle changes to reinforce, you know, the curvature. I don't really know the math behind how this curves, but it's a common curve. It's you know, when you're drafting something, I think they use French curves, or it's the name of the tool, and they're just plastic templates that you put down that kind of allow you to draw these swirly things. And that's kind of the idea here. So I'm gonna get back in here, really dig this trench in. And so you see how this one's swirling around and kind of tucking in, and we've got this interesting shape happening here. I want to mimic that on the other side, so we're gonna need to kind of play with the way that's it's working right now. It's not really doing what we need it to do. Okay, so some of this is just going to be about reshaping to make sure we're starting on a good angle here. Even up with this one. And then again, we want to dig in to where it's feels kind of like it's hooking in. So the difference is this one is turned over on its side. So when you hook in from this angle, it works. This one needs to hook in here. So we need to come from around, and then it needs to pull in like that. Okay, so over pinching is going to cause some weird things to start happening. So we need to pay attention to what we're doing. Ultimately, some of the heights on these things are not where they need to be. So before we get in there and start really messing around, we need to come in here with clay tools and scrape out sort of the same distance around this thing. So we don't really have a defined wall there. Could try deflating some of this. Might help us out a little bit. Try flattening a little bit. Let's make sure we switch that back on. Ignore that, obviously. So I'm probably too close right now. I need to zoom out. That's better. All right, time is almost up. Enjoyed hanging out with you guys tonight. I hope your weekend is off to a good start. I'm going to be continuing to work on this project for a while, and eventually I'll be doing a course on this. So it'll be about the 3D illustration aspect of this project. So there might be a little bit of everything in it, some modeling, some shading work in cycles, some compositing, but just kind of go over the methods that I use to get my final illustrations in place. So I'm on ArtStation if you guys want to follow me there. Brandon W. Hicks. And please like and subscribe if you're on the YouTube channel. Also hit that little bell so that you get notifications when I go live next time. You can join in on the fun. If you're on Twitch, follow me, and love to engage you guys there. And I'm also on Picarto, so if you guys are watching, thank you for tuning in. Okay, so I think for tonight I'm gonna leave it there. All right, so let's zoom out a little bit, kind of show the whole spoon here. Show the whole thing, clear the mask. There we go. All right, so here we are. Turn on ambient occlusion a little bit. You can kind of see some of these details a little better on the stream. If you want to see kind of what this looks like as a reflective object, it's looking pretty hideous right now because of the lack of smoothing. This will right here probably be a little easier to digest. But you can kind of see what we're doing. It's an interesting model so far. So I'm gonna switch back over to object mode, and then let's smooth this out real fast. Okay, it's a little better. So yeah, we're getting there. It's coming together, and I probably won't pick up any more sculpting on the spoon in the next few streams. I'll be working on some other stuff, but definitely tune in. The schedule right now is Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. I'm coming in at 7 p.m. Central Time. Before I get going, there's one more thing I want to show you guys. I've just launched a new training academy called the Orange Guild. So I'm going to show you real fast kind of what this looks like. There we go. So if you head on over to theorangeguild.com, there's going to be a link in the description. If it's not in this video tonight, you can check it out in my other videos on YouTube. And you can get a free month of training if you use that link to subscribe to the Orange Guild. It's a membership site for Blender training. So basically we're starting there and we're going to see where it goes. If you head on over to the membership section, you can see all the features that you're going to get for a month-to-month fee. And it's $19 a month. You get the first month free if you use the link in the description. And then you can pay $199 a year if you want to do that instead and save a little bit of money. So I'm a Blender Foundation certified trainer. I've been doing this many years now. And so these are some of the courses I currently have available. We are expanding. We're doing more tutorials, more courses are coming out, and I'm trying to get more tutorials on the guild and the schedule. So you've got access to a section where you can ask questions, submit your portfolio for critique, all that kind of stuff. And so the best option is to just do the $19 a month subscription. It's a lot cheaper than buying these courses outright, and it is an awesome deal. So if you want to check that out, you can go in here and preview some of these lectures, click on a course, get in here, and there's a description. Zoom on down to the bottom. You can see the entire curriculum here, and any of these little preview buttons, you can click on those and just kind of watch some of these materials. These courses are pretty long, 9-10 hours a piece, some of them, and so really, really good deal if you want to get in there and hang out. So anyways, I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight. I'll be back next week with some new stuff that we can take a look at. And until then, have a good weekend, and I'll see you next time.